Hi everyone, this is Chris Grosso with the Spiritualist.com. I'm really excited to have our very special guest, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. with us today. Hello, Don Miguel. How are you?
Hi Chris, how are
I'm
you?
really good, thanks. So before we jump in the interview, I just wanted to give our viewers a very abridged version of your bio, just so them know a little bit about yourself. So Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. is a Nagual, which is a Toltec Master of Transformation. He is a direct descendant of the Toltecs of the Eagle Knight lineage and is the son of Don Miguel Ruiz, who probably most of our viewers know. By combining the wisdom of his family's traditions with the knowledge gained from his own personal journey, he now helps others realize their own path to personal freedom. That is no small task, my friend.
Tell me about
So, how are you
it.
doing today, Don Miguel?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well,
Congratulations on the book. It's awesome.
hey, thank you. I don't mind that little plug. I appreciate it, and vice versa. I really love your work. Your whole family's work has been very inspirational to me. But the five levels of attachment is phenomenal. I look forward to getting into that with you in a few minutes. What I wanted to start out with was before we get into that. I watched. I think it was last week you did that Fox 9 interview out when you were in Idaho,
Yeah.
and that was great. And you mentioned in that, and you also talk a little, very briefly about this in the beginning of the five levels of attachment, where you talk about your younger rebellious nature, something I
Yeah.
can certainly resonate with.
Yeah.
And in the five levels, you didn't go. Obviously, you didn't have time to go into it in the news interview. In the
Mhm.
book, you mentioned that you had your goth phase and filmmaker phase and everything before you kind of came in line with the teachings and working with your dad. So I wanted to explore that a little bit further because honestly, I think a lot of our viewers are the people. There are certainly those established already in spirituality, but there's a lot of
Mhm.
people first stepping onto the path. So
Mhm.
I would love to hear a little bit, if you don't mind, sharing a little bit about yourself before you came on and that transition into
Sure,
the
sure,
path.
sure, no problem. Well, you can say that my brother and myself, Jose and myself, grew up in the age where we weren't, we grew up with the Beatles, we grew up with the Stones, we grew up with that kind of music. For us, like the musical Jesus Christ Superstar was something beautiful. It wasn't something that a lot of like who grew up with spirituality like, oh, we look at it, but we
Yeah.
we love it. We grew up with that, and then we can say that the thing about every generation is that we love what we have, and both my brother and myself, and I'm going to speak for myself right here more, but
Sure.
Jose and I both went. We discovered the Pesh Mode, we discovered the Cure, we discovered the Smiths,
Yeah.
we discovered Iron Maiden, Motley Crue, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. We like our favorite movie was The Lost Boys.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Michael,
Yeah.
Michael. My brother still gave me a hard time, and there was a time where like and you can say both of us went in our different directions. For me, one pivotal moment was a movie called The Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
For me, The Dead Poets Society was a movie that, in my point of view, changed my life forever because not it only it came when I was discovering that kind of music,
Mm.
and then alongside there's this, oh Captain, my Captain. I've fallen in love with literature, so I became somewhat of an academic. I engaged myself, engorged myself with literature, with books, with anything I can get. From you can say, instead of I know people read Carlos Castaneda,
Yeah.
but my sense of spirituality came from Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Mm.
The writings of the magical realism,
Mm.
and because it's the concept of, we live in this everyday world, but magic still occurs. And in Gabriel Garcia Marquez, may he rest in peace, he captured that beautifully.
Mm.
And there was one time where there's a story. In 1991, both myself and Jose were really into our goth thing. Well, Jose has that heavy metal tinge, and I had that synth pop thing.
Yeah.
And we both had our favorite bands were Caifanes and Café Tacuba, because at that point Spanish rock also started taking on that thing. My father takes us to Teotihuacan for the very first time as a power journey, and everyone is doing their ceremony, and me and Jose are with our headphones back in the day when we had the little thingies with the earmuffs,
Yep.
and we're listening to our music. We had Skid Row playing in our head, we had
Sure.
Metallica playing in our head, we had
Yeah.
Sex Pistols playing in our head. But yet, we took it off at certain points, and we did a process, and it felt good. And then my father, in that particular trip, took us to the Basilica of Guadalupe to be in. Before we went to the airport, we went to the Basilica to, do this moment of communion with the Virgin Mary. And both me and my brother had this experience. We got our rosaries blessed, and it was a magical moment. And we were riding high in that kind of magic moment. We were like, wow, look at that. Because having grown up in the family we grew up with, spirituality and everyday life happens all the time, and we grew up with that.
Yeah.
And we went to the airport in Mexico City, and we went to this little bookstore. Back then, if there was a bookstore or a CD store, a record store,
Right.
Record stores back then, CDs were still not as popular as they are nowadays. There were still vinyl and cassettes.
Yep.
Anytime we find a store, we go in there and plunge. We start looking through all the stuff and see what we can get. And we have our rosaries on. And in the bookstore, we're all in black. And this lady looks at us and says, "You should not be wearing those. You're all in the black. You're in the black. You represent the darkness. You should not wear rosaries." And both of us, having had that experience with divinity, that with Virgin of Guadalupe, we found that, yeah. And at certain times we felt that growing up. Jose would go to an event with his Sex Pistols shirts, and some people would be like, "Why are you wearing that? Don't you know it's a spiritual place?"
Yeah.
And then I walk around with my Joy Division shirt that says "Love will tear us apart."
Yeah.
And some people, how can you wear that? Your father just all about love. How can you wear "Love will tear us apart"? You can say, as a teenager, we rebelled against it. Now I'm going to start talking more about myself here.
Yeah.
I rebelled against it, and just having that feel because I totally understand what my father is. I totally understand what my grandmother is. It's easy for me to engage that. Yet at the same time, we're supposed to hide it. A song like from XTC, "Dear God, sorry to disturb you, but I feel you can make it better down here." Songs like that, we see the beauty of it, and we felt that push. So even in the 90s, if you weren't dressed like a hippie and you entered in spirituality, you were rejected, so you couldn't wear, like you and I wouldn't, the way we dress, like, how can you call yourself spiritual?
Yeah.
This is back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I enjoy my music, and I enjoyed art. And when I went to college, I majored in film. So I totally engaged myself. And, little by little, the people who would go to my dad's events were changing. It became less of this specialized group to something that is common sense. When he started to branch out to an audience wider than that select group, it was basically this big thing, and it began to change. You had filmmakers and writers, and it became exciting. We're excited to see you. Even at the age of 38, I'm excited to see you. With Tony Hawk in the background. Just showing off with the tattoos, and it's exciting. Because I have tattoos too.
Yeah, right on.
and Jose too, and Jose Leo does. So, but when in the 90s, when we first started, we felt that disconnect. How can we be? And we bought into it. I bought into it. So I'll keep it with myself. And then there's something happens when you graduate from college and the bubble pops. There's that the idealism of a teenager and the idealism of a young college student pops when all of a sudden you're faced with the reality of everyday life. When all of a sudden it's not something that knowledge is solely in the books. Knowledge is now applicable.
Right.
And you can say that's when life began to teach me. My father really started teaching me really when I graduated from college. That could also have something to do with it. And little by little, I began to understand it, and I continued to rebel against it. Jose engaged it sooner than I did. Jose went to India. Jose understands spirituality from the point of view of Indian and nature. And at that point, I'm totally in my head, academics, reason, logic. And my father engaged me with that. My dad taught me through logic,
Yeah.
And when I began to understand it, when I began to see it in my own way, hey, this is not something that's out there, it's something that's in here. And
Right.
in here, it changes words and names and everything. And it doesn't really matter what symbols it represents. That's exactly what my dad did. When my dad first started teaching the Toltec tradition, he talked all about those beautiful old Toltec symbols. Quetzalcoatl, Tezcatlipoca. He taught from that point of view of a shaman, of a Nagual. And then he shifted it. He took out the symbols and continued to teach the meaning. And then I realized that the symbols are not as important as the meaning that is behind it, because the meaning behind it is what the substance, the experience.
Right.
So when I began to understand that, I re-engaged my family tradition. I stopped my rebellion with him. Mind you, I was also going through a rough patch in my life after his heart attack, after a bad breakup. And, I discovered the whole image of perfection through the eyes of the judge. I put myself in a pedestal, try to live up, and it came crashing down. The illusion always crashes down when the truth is presented before you.
Right.
And that's a moment of heartbreak. So when the story I usually say is like when the Four Agreements came out in 1997, I was 21 years old or 22. I picked it up and I put it down halfway through, and basically it's my dad telling me what to do all over again. And then after that period in my life that, you can call it the Saturn's return or whatever people use as a definition, that moment where I realize I'm no longer a boy, I'm a living being. I'm not gonna call myself an adult either. I'm just this guy who's engaging life, and the facade falls apart. I reread the book and I understood it, and it was no longer something my dad told me. It was something that everyone has seen. There's the reason that book is popular. It speaks to a certain truth that each one of us has.
Yeah.
And I saw that truth reflecting in me, and I began to engage it. So I wanted to continue teaching, but in my language. Even if you hear the difference between me and my brother talk, we talk about the same exact thing, and yet the experience we went through colors the language we use. But we still, both of us, speak from that sense of integrity, of love and spirituality and life. Just the language is different. So you can say that's the end of my rebellion, and the moment I began to understand it. So it's no longer like the description I described to you about all those bands and music and God, whatever, kind of fell down trying to live up to it. For example, it's like, the image of the goth kid. I was trying to live up to an image that doesn't exist. The image of the goth version of me never existed. I tried to live up to it. The worst thing you can call me is a wannabe.
Sure.
And when you're trying to be cool, wannabe is one of the worst things you can call someone.
Yeah, right.
And the reason why it's because we don't want the truth to be exposed. Well, here's the thing: I am a wannabe from that point of view, and who I am is a guy who loves that kind of music, that can dress that part, but I am not that image, and I'm not that stereotype. I don't have to be friends only with God kids or Archie kids or Bohemian kids. I can be friends with anyone.
Right.
To this day, I can honestly say I love country. I enjoy country. I enjoy some reggae. I enjoy. Right now, my favorite album is "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
Oh, great album.
Listening to that as I go down to the river to pray. singing about a good old day.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that I can in the same breath I can sing an XTC song based on atheism, and then sing a love song to divinity through I believe this is not Emily Harris. It's the name of the artist. Oh, she just did an album with Robert Plant.
Oh, Alison Krauss?
Alison Krauss, yeah.
Yeah.
Alison Krauss sings that
Yeah.
song, and she has a beautiful,
She's great.
beautiful voice, and
Yeah.
it's just the most divine thing, you know.
Yeah, I saw them actually a few years ago with T-Bone Burnett here in Connecticut, and it was an
Oh,
amazing
nice.
concert. Yeah, so
Uh,
yeah, but that's so important because I'm very similar to you, where I have very eclectic taste in music. You know,
hmm
I'm all over the place, and if it resonates with me, it resonates with me. Um,
hmm
and I'm just 2 years younger than you. I'm turning 36 in a couple of weeks, so everything you've been
Happy
sharing, well,
birthday!
thank you.
Yes.
But it all resonates with me, and I still find, and I write a bit about this in the book, that you know, I will still, if I'm visiting a new sangha or a church or wherever, I still like to, if, you know,
hmm
if I'm traveling or whatever, check out what's going on. But I still get looks if I happen to be wearing a band T-shirt or something. Same thing you described. So it's still going on today. You know, not always.
Yeah.
I've also been very embraced, and people, you know, as we talk about the tattoos, and people see that and they're like, well, how can you have any interest in spirituality? But you
Mhm.
know, those people are missing the mark. Like you said, it's what's happening in here, what's going on in here. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's exactly the point when I write the 5 levels of attachment.
yeah,
It's that point where, you know, we can learn from spirituality or love or divinity, whatever, from any moment, from the barista. You know, you can say I learned humility from being a production assistant. You know,
mm,
it was the most spiritual experience to learn humility as you're running around a stage trying to satisfy everyone else's need and someone's egos or someone's perception. You know, working together to create this image together,
yeah,
this product, this movie, this video, this music video. The last job I did was a Missy Elliott
huh,
video with Pass the Dutch, you know, and it was a wonderful experience. I can say that working as a PA, I got to meet Michael Stipe, and you know, we
wow,
had a private concert for 25 as we shooting a video for a TV show for Nick Harcourt, the guy from Morning Becomes Eclectic in Los Angeles. Even in those moments, I found spirituality. Spirituality is in everything, and
everything,
if we pigeonhole it here, that if we say at level 4, internalization, that we have to live up to this image,
mm,
then we just like I described the image of the wannabe of the goth kid who tried to live up to the image, we're also doing that with spirituality. We're trying to live up to this image, and we have to reject anything that doesn't look like it. Because if it doesn't look like it, how can you call yourself spiritual? Like if you're vegan and you're not vegan, well, you're spiritual if you do, you're spiritual if you don't,
yeah,
or vegetarian, or you live in a commune, or live in an ashram, or live isolated in the hill.
yeah,
We're every day engaging life.
mm,
You know, whether we're in nature, whether we're in the city, we're engaging life, and that's
right,
the beauty of it, and the willingness to listen to each other. Like this, you can say we detach enough from that internalized or domesticated image of self
mm,
and see what life has.
yeah, yeah,
Life has so much to teach, so much to do, you know, unless we domesticate ourselves to this image, you know, of either of a bohemian or a spiritual person. We're trying so desperately to live up to this image in order to get some credibility, some
mm,
cred. And if we don't live up to it, then you know, like they say in Scott Pilgrim, you lose vegan edge. You know?
yeah, yeah,
And and when you live like that, we're living under the subjugation of someone else's point of view of how we should love ourselves, which
yeah,
means we're rejecting ourselves.
yeah,
So letting go of that image, letting go of that ideal, and beginning to see that everyone, even the voice whom you disagree with the most, has something to teach.
mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, couldn't agree more. So, I mean, your book, The Five Levels of Attachment, is a very important book. You know, I absolutely love it. I love that, you know, you've already elaborated a little bit on it. And the way it's presented, it really is a user friendly, you know, it's applicable, I believe, for any spiritual seeker, and I
Mm.
really admired that about it. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit, go a little more in depth about that.
Mhm.
And I wanted to start with, I'm going to read a little excerpt from it. It's not very long, but I was thinking of a way I could, abridge this. I'm like, no, this is too beautiful. I'm just going to share. It's a paragraph. But you've already mentioned your grandmother a few times, and this is
Mm.
something that in the beginning you're talking about her, and I know I was really inspired by this. So you write that your grandmother asked you, and I'm just like I said, it's just a paragraph, but I love this. She says, "Are you using knowledge, or is knowledge using you?" And she continued, "When you translate, you try to express my words through what you already know, what you think is true. You do not hear me, you hear yourself.
Mhm.
Imagine doing the same thing every single moment in life. If you are looking through life and translating as it goes along, you will miss out on living. But if you learn to listen to life, you will always be able to express the words as they come. Your knowledge has to become a tool you will use to guide you through life, but that can also be put aside.
Mhm.
Do not let knowledge translate everything you experience." Wow. I would love for you if you can elaborate a bit on that. That kind of says it all, but I would love to hear you talk a little further about that, because that, when I read it the first time, was just whoa, like
Mm.
right here. So
Okay. Well, when you use knowledge as an instrument, it's basically everything we know. Knowledge, you can say, is completely subject to agreement. It's just a symbol that, and it's meant to allow ourselves to understand how the world functions. But most importantly, it allows us to understand each other. Right now, you and I are using knowledge in order to understand each other.
right,
So when we use knowledge, we become aware, one, that knowledge exists because we give it life. We give it meaning. And the way we use it as a tool is the same way put instruments into a tool shed.
mm-hmm.
You imagine you have a screw that you need to screw. You go into the tool shed, you grab the screwdriver, you drill it in. Then you have a nail. You're not going to use the screwdriver. You can put it, probably turn it around and go like this, but you're going to hurt your hand around. So
Right,
you put it back, grab the hammer, put it in, and you're done, and you put it back. Knowledge is exactly that. We use the information that we've acquired through life. And knowledge is simply that. Knowledge is basically putting into words and symbols an experience.
mm,
So, from education, from one generation to another, they're sharing all the information that worked for that generation in order to expand. It can say, going from Edison and Tesla,
mm,
the experimentation with electricity, to you and I talking right now through the electricity that they only envision lighting up a room,
right,
and Tesla could have imagined it just a bit more, but not even Tesla could have imagined that we're using electricity to speak to one another from Connecticut to California, and
yeah,
people who are listening to us are anywhere else in between,
right,
and then and beyond.
yeah,
So the beautiful thing about that is that idea that knowledge was created a long time ago allowed itself to evolve through experience, repetition, and all that, to the point where we are here right now speaking to one another, going beyond the image of illuminating a room to the point of not only sharing a vision, but hearing a vision
mm,
and interacting, an actual living interacting. This is not an illusion. This is something that an idea expressed through action has created.
right,
This is knowledge used as an instrument. Not when knowledge uses me, it has to stay as a light bulb.
mm,
That's the way the founders thought about it. That's how Edison thought about it. That's how Tesla thought about it, and it should be used. How dare you use it in a different way? All of a sudden, we have this idea of how it should be done, and this is what is anything else doesn't exist. What, the idea of using it to talk to someone else? Preposterous. No, it's this way. This is the only way. And all of a sudden, what I know, instead of being something that allows the imagination to spread, something that allows me to survive, becomes something that limits my perception of what could be or what is.
yeah,
So from that point of view, using those two examples, we're talking about free will. When I use knowledge, I'm applying my free will because I'm aware of who I am. I am the expression of life, and free will is the result of saying yes and no.
mm,
When I lose that is when knowledge has complete control. and my will is subject to a belief rather than me perceiving and making a choice for myself. My knowledge, my attached knowledge, makes the choice for me, is what we know as the automatic yes and the automatic no.
Right.
So the levels of attachment reflect that those differences. At level one, imagine a flower we call awareness. At level one, the flower is completely open with the authentic self. Then, as we engage a moment, in the same way we use the instruments of the tool shed, it engages, so the flower closes briefly as we engage that moment. But we never lost sight of who we were, so the flower opens up again. So it's a flower that's pulsating.
Mm.
So you can say free will is expressed through every moment I've lived. At level three, identity, I begin to identify myself, like as Toltec, indie spiritualist, goth kid, whatever. Now all of a sudden we have this image: spiritual guy,
Vegan.
vegan,
Yeah.
but all these things now control my need to know who I am is based on a definition rather than an experience.
Mm.
Even when I'm not engaged in those things, I'm calling myself that.
Right.
But even here, even when the moment has passed, the flower does not open. So I've attached myself to a moment with a definition, to an idea, to a definition, or to a potential with a definition. Now it defines who I am and begins to color my choices. But even here, we still have the ability to engage other people. The only difference is I've defined myself with this. At level four, the flower closes even more and doesn't open again when the moment is over, because now I'm going to use that identity and I'm going to domesticate myself to it.
Mm.
Now my free will is now beginning to be subjugated to domestication. If I live up to this image, I'm worthy of my own acceptance. If I don't live up to this image, then I'm worthy of my own rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say, at this point, what I know, I'm going to use it to subjugate my will, and I'm going to try to subjugate your will. Whenever we judge someone, we're punishing them for agreements they never made.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we make them agree is to first believe the punishment I'm giving them. Then at level five, fanaticism, the flower is completely closed, and I only perceive what what my beliefs allow me to see. You know, it'll spin it or distort it to the way I want the world to see. So knowledge now becomes a completely distorted thing. Knowledge no longer reflects life, where it's a clear reflection of life. Knowledge is completely distorted based on my attachment, and my attachment distorted knowledge, just as it distorted my sense of self, where my beliefs control my actions. How dare you do this? How dare you wear that rosary? Don't you know you're wearing black? Well, from that moment, when I was 16 years old, if I believed it, then I would never wear black, and I let her judgment of me control me. But at that moment, I knew who I was because I had the experience, and I didn't let it subjugate me to a certain degree. Of course, I rebelled against it, but then I tried to subjugate them. And fanaticism basically is this thing that I've attached myself so much to my image that says, well, the hell with you. I'm not going to listen to you. This is going to me. And I'm going to reject anything that's going to change my mind. So it becomes this us against them, this war of imposing and subjugation. So the more we attach ourselves to this image, one, the more we reject ourselves. So you can say, the opposite of love is love. Or you can say more simply, the opposite of unconditional love at level one is conditional love at level five. From that point of view, you know, because the opposite of love is not hate or anger. And hate and anger are just the instruments we're going to use to domesticate another. The opposite is love, the type, how we can express it. So you can say that, how does that do with knowledge? Well, I want to use knowledge to subjugate myself to love myself conditionally. And that's why I begin to distort knowledge. And I attach myself to knowledge because knowledge is always subject to agreement. It always changes. It always morphs, you know, because the symbols we use are always going to be changing.
Right.
And you can say that the idea of a light bulb, they're using electricity to illuminate a room, has evolved to not only to what we're doing, because there's more to electricity now that the idea that you and I are doing, yes, it might be It was cutting edge 10 years ago, but it's gone beyond that. Now we're moving cars, we're moving many things with electricity,
Right.
and it's allowing the idea to flourish.
Hmm.
So from that point of view, it's not about detaching from life. It's about re-engaging life and seeing life for what it is and
Right.
how it is, and
So,
realize that I am a co-creator with it.
and I definitely feel like I know people at each level. Which thank you for going into to a bit about each level. I think that's really important for our viewers to know. Those on the spiritual path really, the goal is to get back to that authentic self. Which you talk about, and that could also be known as Brahman or Dharmakaya or the Godhead or whatever tradition has its own wording for it. And you talk about um, it becomes obscured and through these filters and our attachments, which you've already discussed a bit about the belief systems, and you reference it as the smoky mirror in the book.
Mhm.
So how can we anyone that's trying to find that authentic self, and I'm talking about the people that are really authentically, they don't want to be seekers, they want to be finders. I
Mhm.
find there's a difference. How do we start working with these attachments in this smoky mirror? How do we familiarize ourselves with it and begin to work through that to clear it out?
Well, the nice thing is that the levels of attachment are just an instrument of becoming aware.
Yeah.
It's like an alcoholic or drug addict that becomes aware of what he or she has created.
Right.
It's a moment of clarity.
Yeah.
And in that moment of clarity, we see the truth. And we have a choice to continue to live in that illusion or to let go. So you can say from that point of view, the levels of attachment is not a goal to go all the way open. It's lets us know where we are. And if we want to move, it's because that's what we want. If we want to stay at
Mm.
level 4, we'll stay at level 4. But it's that moment of choice, becoming aware. If you see it as the levels of attachment as an instrument at level 5 to break through the illusion of level 5. Well, my favorite story of a level 5 is Don Quixote de la Mancha. If he sees giants, he's worthy of the name Don Quixote. But if he sees windmills, his real name is Alonso Quijano. So you can say from this point of view, the windmills represent the truth. And since he saw the windmills and he doesn't want to see the windmills, he wants to still see the illusion, and he'll create a story that allows him to still see it.
Mm.
Ah, Sancho, don't how easily you are fooled. Don't you know as my arch nemesis, the magician who turned these giants into windmills just to make me look bad. At that moment, Don Quixote preferred the illusion.
Right.
And you can say that the moment we lost awareness of our authentic self is the moment we prefer the illusion or the lie over the truth.
Mm.
But the best way to let go of it is to accept the truth when it's presented before. So if we see it from the point of view of the levels of attachment reflecting our truth, if the levels of attachment allows the level 5 to see it, wow, that's impressive. But it mostly will let people at level 4 see it,
Mm.
or level 3. Well, that's where the majority of the people see it. And in order for that to happen, one has to be willing to see it, see the truth in our life. In the 5 levels of attachment, I use the image of a soccer game, mostly
Right.
because I'm challenging someone to find spirituality in a soccer game
Mm-hmm.
that is not necessarily in a pigeonhole. That's once again a story that we talked about before is presented in that image. How can spirituality be presented in a soccer game?
Yes.
Well, the reason why I used it is exactly that. If we can see it in a soccer game, then we can see it anything else. And it's a lot easier to see it in a sporting thing
Mm.
rather than something religious or political. Because
Right.
as soon as I talk spirituality or politics with the levels of attachment, people get stuck at level 3. And all of a sudden, it's hard to move up or explain anything else.
Right.
But if they're able to understand it in a language that they might find foreign to
Mm.
themselves, it's easier to see. And then if they apply it in their own life, they'll go, I can see how I'm a level 4 with vegan. I can see how I'm a level 4 with my homeopathic remedies. I can see how I'm at level 5 with this belief or that. Or like, oh, I'm at level 3. Yes. I don't subjugate people. Yes, I'm a vegetarian, but the people around me don't have to be vegetarian in order to be my friend,
Right.
because what's important is the friendship.
Right.
Is finding our if the levels of attachment function like a mirror that allows us to see the truth of where we're at, then we can exercise our free will, which is Do I want to stay at this level? Do I want to increase my level? Or do I want to decrease it?
Mm.
Because when I was taught about detaching when I was young, it was such an abstract term. What do I detach from? Well, if I'm going to detach myself from everything, well, how am I going to engage life? I have to engage life. And the levels of attachment breaks it down in different levels. Because one attachment, the level of a story, for example, the story of the soccer is increase. You get one attachment at level 1 that takes you to level 2. But when the game didn't end, the flower didn't open again. You increased it. I increased it, and that single attachment increases with time. So you can say it grew. The attachment grew to the point where it controlled my attention. And then to detach basically looks like that. Instead of something that takes you like this, it's something that goes like that. So from that point of view, it's simply this thing of how I'm applying this energy that I'm calling an attachment. An attachment basically is like a little girl or little boy who does it, goes, mine. This
Right.
action of the arm, mine, mine, mine. Well, when a child is that young, they don't have control of anything, but they still want to control it to stop it from happening or changing or evolving. Well, that attachment, like, no, mine, we invest ourselves emotionally to something that is not a part of us. And the thing with life is that everything evolves, everything changes.
Yeah.
So
The
from that
constant.
point of view, it's simply about how do I want to live my life? Do I want to live my life with conditional love or unconditional love?
And actually, that's a great segue into another question I had, and this is kind of the last question we'll talk about the book. Is you talk about self-love and acceptance, and that's something for me I struggled with for many years and still do sometimes. It's something I work with. And you wrote in the Five Levels of Attachment, of all the beliefs to detach from, this is the most important one. Let go of the attachment that you must obtain some image of perfection in order to be happy. And of course, I absolutely loved that. So that's something I would love, if you don't mind elaborating a little bit further
No, no
on
problem.
that,
Yeah.
because people have the idea of, okay, I need to do this, but how do we do that?
Well, actually, that's the book I'm writing right now is actually exactly about that.
Oh,
It's
good,
it's
cool.
it's 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 that part. Basically, if we put it levels of attachment, it's going from level 4 to level 3. Because to let go of level 4 is to let go of conditional love and embracing unconditional love. Even though we have an identity, we let go of that condition. Let me explain it in a different way, and how to see it in our life. And I'm going to use reason.
Yeah.
Every word we use is an empty symbol whose definition is subject to the agreement of an individual or a community. For example, in America, the word fanny is a very innocent way to refer to someone's bottom or a buttocks, bum. In England, it's a sexist, derogatory, demeaning word that refers to a woman's private area.
Sure.
It's the C word here in the States.
Yes.
Both are pronounced exactly the same, enunciated the same way, even spelled the same way, but two different communities both speak English. One uses it as an innocent term that little kids and grandmas use, and the other one is the most sexist, demeaning, horrible, poisonous word that you can think of to refer to, well, a beautiful individual. I'm responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for what you hear, because everyone grows up in different. The language we use is different. But if we could see that same concept with language, that here's this Mexican American guy telling someone from Britain that no, it's an innocent term, and like, no, how can you call yourself a spiritual? You're saying such horrible things. Well, we grew up with those ideas, and we see the world through these ideas, and it's completely subject to agreement. If we understand that with words, it's also the truth with perfection. Perfection is something that is completely free of any flaw. Guess what? We define what a flaw is. A flaw is completely a self-definition. I can say to myself, the most perfect version of me is at the age of 27 weighing 170 pounds with a full set of hair. I look at myself in the mirror and that doesn't exist anymore. I don't weigh 170. I'm 38 and my hair is what it is. Look. If I look at myself in the mirror and I'm judging myself, I'm seeing those things as a flaw. But a flaw is something that we agree with, which means I'm punishing myself with my own agreements. I'm punishing myself with something I've said yes to. From that point of view, we're punishing ourselves with our own illusion, with our own beliefs. And those judgments, those flaws, we set from it, or we agreed with someone who said those were flaws. With Marilyn Monroe, James Mansfield, Sophia Loren, and Audrey Hepburn will still be the image of beauty in today's age. It's changed so much. And mind you, they were still subjugating themselves. Audrey Hepburn had a hard time with beauty, and she was anorexic. Marilyn Monroe had a hard time with insecurity, and well, Sophia Loren is Sophia Loren. She's just a powerhouse. But the thing about it is that we all subjugate ourselves with a definition of what beauty is, yet the definition of what beauty is changes dramatically from generation to generation. To being a waif in the 1800s was not considered something of beauty. So if you see it from that point of view, perfection, especially through the eyes of the judge, and the judge is our beliefs, our ideas, our mind. What in the Toltec tradition we call the mind that's the parasite, that is the judge and the victim. Well, then it'll grab this image of perfection and says, in order for you to be worthy of love, you have to be perfect. Like, for example, let's use myself as an example. My name is Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. I don't take things personal. I always do my best. I don't make assumptions. I forgot the fourth agreement. No! How can I call myself Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.? How can I call myself a Toltec? Oh, it's the goth days all over again. You're such a wannabe. From that point of view, if I want to live up to this image of Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., then I'm going to try to be perfect. And I'm going to, if I achieve it, then I'm going to try to stay there. Like it's like working out. The easiest part of getting into shape is getting into shape. The hardest part is staying into shape.
Yeah.
Well, the hardest thing about enlightenment is becoming enlightened. The hardest part is staying enlightened because life continues. Life goes in this back and forth flow. It keeps going because we're always engaging life. We don't live in an ashram. We don't live in a monastery. We don't live isolated up in the hills. We're continuously engaging life. And life is set by the agreements of back and forth, back and forth. And one of those agreements is the condition of, do you love yourself conditionally or unconditionally? And if you believe the concept of conditional love, then we believe that in order to be worthy of love, we have to be perfect based on our agreement of what we should be. If your conditional love is to live up to this title, the indie spiritualist, and all of a sudden about 20 years ago, you're going to outgrow Tony Hawk, and you're going to like someone else. No, but I was the one who wrote the indie spiritualist. I have to live up to it.
Right.
At that point, we're rejecting ourselves. We created an image, just like me, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I'm judging myself with a model that doesn't exist. Yet I'm punishing myself, which means I'm domesticating myself, level 4 and level 5, with this idea. At level 4, I'm judging myself. So that's a self-rejection. At level 5, I'm hating myself. I'm rejecting myself so much with sexism, racism, whatever. So that from that point of view, our sense of loving ourselves comes from that choice. Do I accept myself for who I am at this very moment? Because at this very moment, I'm alive. The future me doesn't exist yet. The past me, I can't go back in the past and change my mind back then because intent no longer exists. The only truth that exists is this present moment that moves with me from the moment I am born to the moment I die. And it's always changing. It's always evolving. I'm not the same guy I was back when I was a teenager. That description of me during my rebellion, that guy ceased to exist over 12 years ago. And the guy who even wrote the 5 levels of attachment ceased to exist about a year ago. I've been going through the process and I'm understanding it more and more and more to the point where I understand this, I understand that. Life happens. And then you realize that the level of attachment when you get to level 1, you realize that even at level 5, they're the authentic self. They're just not aware of it. I
Right.
used to, when I started writing it, I really believe the perfect examples of level 1 was Jesus, Muhammad, Krishna, Buddha, all these beautiful enlightened teachers. And then when I get there and I understand it, the guy pumping my gas at the station, he's the authentic self. The
Right.
guy or the girl who's serving me coffee or writing a book, or Ann Coulter, she's the authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Or Marianne Williamson, she's the authentic self. Everyone is,
Right.
because we're all alive, but we're not aware of it. And that's the thing. The only reason why we're not aware of it is that we believe that we're this definition.
Right. Yeah.
And the only thing that separates us is a point of view.
I tried to tackle that in one of the vignettes in Indie Spiritualist titled, I think it was like Jesus, Hitler, Slayer, and Bieber. And I talk about, though, an
Leave it.
interesting combination of
Yeah,
folks.
leave it to Beaver.
But like you said, underneath, the agreement, or the whatever we see in them is, like you said, the authentic self, the divine being. So, um, I feel very fortunate and blessed to have had these experiences enough to where I can see that. But like you said, sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah,
But I know in my heart, and from experience, the truth of that. But it's
yeah,
also, I think you also nailed something that else that's really important, is it's always changing. Like I'm working on my second book, and I go back and look at something I wrote in the first book. I'm like, wow, like, not that I disagree with it, but it's like I have such a deeper understanding or idea behind it now, and it's a really interesting process. And Gandhi said something to the effect of, I don't know verbatim, but like uh, something about my commitment is to truth over consistency, something like that. Because he acknowledged truth is always, or everything's always changing.
yeah,
There is no constant. So
yeah.
what's true for you today in the moment? So
Exactly. Like, for example, look at George Lucas. He created wonderful movies. He went back and re-edited them, and they look different. Star Wars is not the same as
nope.
it was in the original version. It changed it sometimes for the better, and I could have done without the singing Alien and Return of the Jedi. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
there's sometimes it's wonderful not to be able to go back and change them. For if I go back to writing my book, The Five Levels of Attachment, it looked dramatically different.
yeah,
Yeah, it would.
yeah,
But instead of rewriting that one, I'm going to write another one
yeah.
that's going to build upon it and
Right.
build upon it. That's the beautiful thing about inspiration. The Beatles could have rewritten "Love Me Do" over and over again, but
Mm,
they got to the Magical Mystery Tour. They got to Norwegian Wood. They got to Let It Be. They evolved. Even in their solo albums, they could have gone back to "Love Me Do," but they continued.
yeah.
That's the beautiful thing of inspiration. You see what you've created and you make it, improve it, let it evolve in that next moment.
Mm,
And just like our work of art, our life, the beautiful thing about our work is just imagine this painting that continuously evolves, a living painting that changes with every stroke, with every idea, with every thought.
mm-hmm.
And it's a living thing. And it'll stop painting the moment I take my last breath.
Right.
When my heart gives out its last pulse, in the last moment, I'm able to enjoy this moment from a single point of perception that is me. Because
Mm,
eventually, when I let go of this body, let go of this mind, and I pass on to the next stage, the levels of attachment will cease to exist even then.
yeah. Yeah. So beautifully said. I think that's a great place to kind of bring this to a close. Before we do wrap it up, though, I'm glad we got to talk a little bit about your book you're working on now. Do you by chance have a release date, or is it still too far out for you to have
Well,
that yet?
right now they projected, and like it's written in pencil, not ink.
Yeah, right.
Um, the deadline is July 31st. I just finished with the purging. We're about to enter the stage of editing and filling in the holes, which is my favorite part of writing a book.
Hmm.
Because it's when you first write, the target is all over the place,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you learn to hone in your point and you go for it. And right now, it's supposed to be released March of next year, 2015. At
Exciting.
this idea, if it changes or not, we'll find out. But
Yeah.
right now, that is the projected idea. So right now I'm gonna take it easy for the rest of the year, and then take a big tour next year.
Cool. So yeah, besides the book, that's pretty much what you're doing. You don't have any. Do you have any other workshops lined up, or is it just?
I have one workshop that I'm doing in Colorado as a weekend retreat. It's based on one of my dad's stories of the magical deer, and it's a weekend workshop. Our friends, Franco, created the event, so they invited me to do it, and I'm gonna do it. It'll be
That's
fun.
great.
And then I might be going to Europe. Um,
Nice.
that'll be fun.
Nice.
But I'm gonna try to keep it mellow in the last quarter of the year, so I can be with my family before I hit the road again.
Cool. And that just made me think too. We have our mutual friend Jill at
Mm.
Circle Three, and she had told me that you guys, you Jose, and I believe your father sometimes do a big retreat in Mexico. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
Jose and my dad are doing one this next month. Actually, they're
Oh, are
going
they
to
really? Yeah.
Teotihuacan, and I'm not gonna be joining them because I'm writing a book.
Right. Right.
But sometimes I join them. Last year I was there with them,
Cool. So maybe
and then
next year you'll.
yeah. So and right now my dad is semi-retired, so right now that's the only thing he's scheduled to be that live.
Oh, right
So
on.
that'll be exciting.
Cool. Well, thank
Yeah.
you. Is there anything else we didn't cover before we finish that you wanted to share, or do you think we got through some good stuff?
No, we gotta stop. I have to say it's so cool to talk to you.
Oh, thanks.
It's fun to engage someone whom I can relate with quite a bit. And I mean, I
Yes.
enjoy your work, and keep doing what you're doing, man.
The feeling is very mutual, and I really appreciate your time.
Oh,
And I really, again, for our viewers, the Five Levels of Attachment is a very important book for me and many others. So I can't recommend it enough. And all
oh,
your work, your whole family's work, is doing great things. So
thank you,
I
thank you
honor
so.
you very much, and I thank you for your time.
Enjoy yourself and have fun, and congratulations on this.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much. I really appreciate it.
Ooh,
Take
thanks.
care.
Too.